folks, it's Herb Stevenson.
Sahadeo Ramharrack.
This is Natural Passages Revealing Unmarked Doors of Life.
Thank you so much for tuning in and joining us today. We're going to pick up our conversation where we're talking about healing presence and kind of breaking down of what it looks like. But now we're going to talk more about how do we actually create this for ourselves.
So for those who go to YouTube, you're going to be able to see that we're going to actually go through some slides as a process. Hopefully we'll be able to give you enough support around listening and following, and we'll go from there. So over the years, I've created this awakening presence, challenges to be present as a tool to help people understand. So I'm going to start the process, and then Sahadeo and I will get into further conversation about it. So I like to use 4 phases to talk about the continuous awakening journey map is what I call it, because we are in a constant state of waking up, some people faster than others. It's not a good or bad. It's just what's your journey in this lifetime. But Sahadeo, you and I have had this conversation. When we get ready to have a massive change, the thing that pops up, which means we're awakening, we begin to ask the question of who and what I thought I am, because I'm not sure anymore.
Mm-hmm. I've
And
definitely...
Go ahead.
Those feelings of, I think I could really wear the beliefs, for example, that you were raised with and the beliefs that you want to create for yourself.
Right. Well, it's your familiar side of yourself doesn't exist anymore. It's really what it ends up being. So your example is it states in here in phase 1, perceptions deepens with a clearing of old stories, beliefs, and ways of doing things. So everything I thought was true, I suddenly began to question. I wake up, the world has changed. I talked about this in a prior session. I went through a dramatic shift in my earlier part of my life of 40 years ago, where I went to sleep thinking, if I die today, I'll be happy. And the next day I woke up and my whole world changed. I just realized that all the perceptions that I'd had of what I thought was real was not real. It was one way of looking at it, but it was revealing to me that I really needed to ask myself who and what I am now. And when this happens, it gets very disorienting. We feel, difficult for us. And so we begin to ask who and what I wonder I am. And it's the wondering is the beginning to open the door instead of the way I created myself based on all of my interactions of my life, all the teachings of family, education, religion, friends, all comes into question. So I get caught between the old and new as glimpses of insights appear and disappear. Wow, that's not true anymore. And so I begin to shift. And then the third part that begins to happen as I'm awakening is I ask what I am. And I begin to actually now define. So there's a newly formed container or sense of self for meaning making and perceiving that solidifies and gives me a sense of, if not wholeness, at least an awareness that I'm different than I was. And then phase 4 is actual awareness of a deeper sense of self-awareness evolves into day-to-day existence that remains instead of wanes. And at that point, I have created a deeper sense of presence of myself through my own conscious awareness of having gone through this process. So you got any questions or comments about that?
Yeah, so this relates to a little bit, I see that spiral that we had mentioned or talked about before. Some progress like forward, then you're looking back and coming back again until you can land in the I am present. And it's that awareness of self. So I found that in my story, whenever I feel anxious or I feel like I'm being pulled out of the moment, I know it. And I just see the rabbit hole of thoughts. And then I just pull myself back to the center and I say, I know that the anxiety is like the story that I'm telling myself. And then I pull myself back in to the I am and try to sit. So whatever's causing me that anxiety now, I look at it from a different way to see how to like move forward. But it's in such a calm, peaceful place that doesn't even call for action, because anxiety is pulling for action. And sometimes the thing that I was just thinking about is not even important or needing that much attention anymore.
Well, this process is the up and down. The reason for it is it's kind of that way. It's the closest I could come to describing that we do go up, we get an insight, and then we go back down, and we go up, and then we go back down. So it's like we expand and then we contract, and in the expanding, we develop new ideas or new awarenesses, and in the contraction, we begin to try to make meaning of it. And so it's this process of, is depicted here. It shows it as up and down, but if you really look at, if you're able to see, if you're watching on YouTube, you're beginning to see that it's more than that. It's more like a spiral. So, but another way to look at it is this one, which describes the awakening process.
Mm-hmm.
So awareness happens when we heed a calling to see the world different. And a lot of people like, what the hell does that mean? Well, it's kind of like you wake up and you have an intuition that begins to question how you've been viewing the world. So I call that a calling. Oftentimes we have a calling, an intuition to look at something different. And doubt then is the counterpart to that intuition. It's what says, well, no, that's not true, or who do you to think that, or whatever else. And so awareness is the beginning of the calling in it. And there's 4 steps. Something new appears, not seen before, but you realize it's always been there. Then we review what we know and realize we've been filled with, and I call these no longer truths. They were true for the longest time, but we realize they're no longer true for me. They're not going to define my life.
Mm-hmm.
And though difficult, we began to see a new truth about ourselves. Instead of living from past creative adjustments, we began to realize and be the presence of what is present, which means I am now witnessing myself. I'm beginning to see myself in a whole different way. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. That made me think about one of the awakenings that I think I had. I'll just share a little example, like with my mother. She would sometimes come through my apartment and clean it up and move everything around. And that would irritate me. I couldn't find anything. And it was like, felt like a constant battle. But when one day I was, in my own growth, began to see it in another way, which is like, this is her way of showing care and love. Like she, creating order, helping to clean up your space, like is a way of just trying to help a person organize their life. And so it changed the whole way of how I saw her coming through my place and being triggered by, you're violating my boundaries, you're making it difficult, and seeing it as she's being herself, and this is how she's showing in her little way that she's caring and kind and loving to you.
And that's, we heed a calling to see the world different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we say yes, we have an insight. Our relationship with our mother changes. Our relationship with others changes. It's always funny.
Yeah.
There's an old phrase that I don't know if it's still used, but I grew up with it. It's when the kids hit their late 20s and early 30s, suddenly how smart the parents become. Because up to that point, they couldn't see what the parents were seeing and trying to support them, whether it be through love or warning them about you getting ready to step into a pile of cow patties or whatever else. Life experiences started teaching enough for us to be able to aware of that. So if we go to the next step is if we've heeded the call, awakening is an uninterrupted moment of awareness. And this is a good way to look at it. So we see ourselves possibly for the first time as something more than a collage of cliches, cultural restrictions, creative adjustments. In other words, the brain's done everything it's supposed to. It's a biologic intelligence designed to constantly make meaning, to keep us safe, to help us learn the rules of success. In other words, survive the world. And so the awakening is an uninterrupted moment of awareness, like you had. You had an uninterrupted moment of awareness of suddenly seeing that your mother's love was right in front of you.
Yeah. And this battle had been going on for years.
Yeah.
And then just all of a sudden, one day, this thought.
So in those cases, you no longer saw her as meddling.
Yeah. Or controlling.
Or control. So the next step happens is similar to what we talked about earlier, is curiosity and clearing, which means a newfound curiosity that drives me to see something I just didn't see, like you did. So a deep knowing sense of seeing anew by understanding I can only see what I believe.
That, right? That was it. Like the way that I framed it, these beliefs that I had about her actions.
Right. So
until I believe something different, that's the only way I could see something new.
Sure. So I like to tell an old story that I'd heard years ago that came out of anthropology, but it was an emphasis of explaining I can only see what I believe. It's supposedly a true story where the medicine man told the chief, he says, I need, do you trust me? And he said, yeah, I trust you. And he says, I need you to do something. I need you to order the whole tribe to go down to the beach. They lived on an island. Mm-hmm. And we're going to stay there for 3 days and 3 nights. And they're going to be very frustrated. And you might even be frustrated, but I just need you to trust me. Because our survival depends on this.
Yeah. So
everybody grumbling, took, blankets and a few things and some water and some food, and they all went to the beach. And they sat there, and they kind of set up a little bit of a camp right at the edge of the beach where there were some trees and stuff, so they had some protection. And the first day, everybody's curious. The second day, they're starting to complain all over the place. It's a waste of time. Why are we doing this? On the third day, when they woke up, because each day he told them, look out into the ocean. And every day they're frustrated because the only thing they saw was blue sea.
Mm.
The third day, though, they're looking again, and it's a practice, and the mind suddenly says, oh, you actually want to see. And they suddenly saw all of these ships docked in the bay that were going to come in and invade this island.
Mm.
Up to that point, because they had never seen a ship, they couldn't see it because they could only see what they believe, which is there's blue water. We all do the same thing. Even in our relationships, if I have a certain belief about somebody, I'll hold it. Yours was your mother is meddling. Well, how many parents can't believe that their son or daughter's into drugs?
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe that. And so what we have to do is constantly question ourselves, and what these challenges to be present can happen in one of two ways. We invoke it by constantly asking ourselves, going through that process at the beginning, the awakening and clearing. Or we have catastrophic event.
Mm.
In a catastrophic event, everything we thought was true is broken. And now we have a different perception.
Mm.
So I didn't have a catastrophic event. I had a lucid moment as I could die tonight, and not realizing it, that I had that experience. The impact was I did, in a sense, everything I believed fell apart, and I realized I had been telling myself a whole bunch of stories.
Mm.
And when you quit telling the stories, you begin to say, okay, who am I and what's the life I want to create?
That it's the awakening that I think I've had. Like moving back home to New York, I think coming back here and being back in this place has been just seeing all these stories, like they're coming back to me, ways that I see myself, believe about myself. When I know like another version where I believed something else different, where I know myself in a different way.
Sure.
So that reawakening.
Yep. So the third thing is internal examination. The beauty of the inner world begins to reveal itself. And this is an opening to self-define and grants oneself permission to be fully present to yourself. And so you left, came to Cleveland for a number of years. When you go back, all your stories dissolved because you realize you aren't who you were. They aren't who they were.
Yeah.
But you also see the stories that they were still trying to hold on to about you.
Yes. 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 And it's real and it's living, and their vision, and like it's a battle. It rubs
Sure.
because my own way of being is literally competing with these stories.
Yes. And we all do this. So then presence is living in the moment of what is present. And that means living in the moment with the clarity of unrequited perceptions, which means unquestioned perceptions. We just look at the rawness of the moment instead of using my stories in my head to say, well, that's what this is, or that's what this is. And so people struggle with that when we go through this process. And we don't realize that, unfortunately, the mind is actually a recording of all the experiences we've ever had. We've categorized them into this happens, then I do this. This happens, then I do that. And it's intriguing how creative the mind is, because we all end up being literally unique, and how we see the world is completely unique. We have enough commonality to act like we are in the same world, but we're not. And the impact is that for those who begin to question, it's kind of like the Matrix. Do you want the red pill or the blue pill?
Yeah.
And if you want to experience reality, the sad part about the movie was it should have been a greater explanation or portrayal of freedom.
Mm-hmm.
They eventually tried to get to that place, but they started at the difficult darkness, and maybe that's their best way for them to do it. Because at first, when you strip away everything that you thought was true,
Yeah,
it's scary.
absolutely. Absolutely. Right now, like, for example, just thinking about how you brought, releasing content to the world, this process, this is scary. Putting yourself out there, for us to do it, putting it into the world, at least for me, this is new. But I'm just being present in the process and allowing it to go. And you've been great at holding space for us to go on this journey together. And I'm just taking it with curiosity and being open and allowing and surrendering and calming all of that anxiety.
Sure.
And concerns, or even like my own vision of what I thought, like future, or what I wanted to create, because this also it was a process too.
Sure. So what these slides did was it gives us something. It's a new paradigm of how to look at what you're going through.
Mm-hmm.
There's very little guidance around this. Oftentimes they'll put us into a therapeutic situation and say, well, you're having a, emotional strain or whatever else you want to say. And yeah, it is emotional, but there's another way of understanding it, just like you did, which is, oh, that's a process I went through. The interesting part is, if I know what my process is that I'm getting ready to go through, or I'm in the middle of, it's comforting, because there is a process, something to hold on to, something to follow to give me some guidance and clarity of, what's happening. Mm-hmm. And is it going to be uncomfortable? Sure, it's going to be uncomfortable, because you've just redefined how you looked at the world.
Mm-hmm.
But the impact of it is if we really look at it, we go through this all the time at different parts of our life. In the old indigenous cultures, they had an initiation for every change of life. And so Jewish tradition of bar and bat mitzvah is a transition. You're not supposed to look at the world that way anymore. This is what you begin to embrace. Marriage is an initiation into how to look at the world different. Having
Yeah.
a child is an initiation into how to be different.
Different. Yeah.
And when we begin to realize these are normal transitions, we can get away from some of the things that we've done in the past, which is, that somebody threw away the manual on uh, uh, marriage or how to be a human being or whatever else it is that we think we're supposed to have a manual for.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, as part of evolution, our evolution is we build enough information and ways of being until it no longer serves us. The tension creates a shift. We go through this process of, who am I?
Who am I?
And it happens over and over. And
Oh, that's what it is. And that's the spiral that we were talking about earlier. It's constant. So there's just got to get prepared for the journey. And I think this framework and methodology and this way of experiencing it is, for me, it's like, it's the truth. I've been doing it and I didn't have words for it and didn't know that this was what was happening to me. And now I have words to kind of like describe and hold space for what is legitimately occurring in my life.
The interesting thing is we have an epiphany when we see something like this, and the epiphany is that's what I'm going through, and now I can name it.
Yeah.
I can name it.
Yeah.
I can do it.
Yeah.
I can deal with it. But until I can come up with a way to name it, because our problem is we live on, basically, Peter Senge did this years ago, he called it mental constructs. We live on all of these meaning-making constructs of how to understand life. And when something doesn't fit in, we fall into the trap of the square peg and round hole.
Yeah.
And a way to look at that as a metaphor, if you first start off with a square peg and a round hole, you have four sides that are not filling the hole.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a good fit. Later, you get one, the square peg's bigger than the hole. So you smack it with a hammer and knock off the four corners, which is not a proper fit. And so we do that on a constant basis until something happens that suddenly realizes everything's not a square peg that needs to be hammered into a round hole. And so when that happens, we begin to build an energy that simply says the mind goes into a deconstructive process or an expanding process, whichever way you want to look at it, which differentiates what happened but creates a higher level of integration.
Mm-hmm.
And when the higher level of integration comes in, you have an aha. So you had so you get it?
Yeah, because the aha just happened. And it's funny that it happened in, like, as we were speaking, I had to put it in like my Hindu brain. It was processing it that way. And literally this physically happened. It was like you said degeneration and at the same time a regeneration. And regeneration we will call like Shakti or female energy, and degeneration would be like Shiva's energy. And I had like a little puja that brought that balance together. And that was like part of the aha that was happening. Which in the aha it's actively happening awareness, actively happening alignment. I used to believe it was alignment, but now I'm just really coming back to actively happening awareness. And that's kind of like the cycle I feel like I keep seeing pop up for me. Every moment there's true freedom in this too, because that's I think what I had wanted for myself, that I had experienced and I had known, and I wanted to get back there. And it is truly freeing when you are co-creating each moment and opportunity that you get.
And the issue for you that's important, what you just said, Sahadeo, is you're aware you're co-creating this every moment, either with the environment, people around you, your work requirements, your project, but it's a co-creating process of how you're going to respond. And when we realize that, the first response is holy shit.
Is anyone else getting this?
Right. And the second response is it's empowering.
Yes.
You suddenly realize at a very deep level, it's not spontaneous, oh, I can create it and boom, snap my fingers, I have a new car. But you begin to realize you can influence everything in your life to, within reasonable level, create the exact life you want. Are you going to win the lottery? I don't know. It's 1 in 273 million. So are you the lucky one? But, first it helps just to buy the lottery ticket. But
yes, there you go.
But so the issue for us is, as we go through this process all the time, it is both and. We feel the fear, the doubt, and we feel the intuition. And that's a key piece that I've alluded to a little bit. Intuition, for me, is a constant tap on the shoulder, spirit, if you wish, the universe, God, doesn't matter to me what you call it, is saying, hey, look at this. And when we do look at it, intuition makes us get very excited.
Yeah.
And, oh boy, I want to go do that. If you go back to the spiral, then you have to go back and work through the valley of doubt. Well, who was I to think I could do that?
Yeah.
Because that's part of our human experience.
Yeah.
And the process, the more is I commit that this is really important to me and I have a vision of moving forward with it. I will understand that there are obstacles and there's roadblocks that's going to prevent me from doing things. But if you look at people who have become single-minded focused, they're the ones who've ended up becoming, whether they're rock stars or famous actors. If you listen to all their stories, doubt was told everywhere. I received, when I first put the First Thoughts book out, when I wrote it 28 years ago, and it took me until just a year ago to publish the first one, 200 rejections. I kept the book, put it on the internet for a while, free of charge. Anybody want to read it? And then I decided to move forward. And now 4 books are published and it's audio now as well. And I had to accept the original intuition. This was a dream that I had and wanted to fulfill, and eliminate the doubt and move forward. And, one of the things I got clear about, I have no illusions about being the stories being, quote unquote, masterpieces. What I have clarity about is they are a roadmap for people on their personal journeys to read and get insights. And so, as you're aware, there's 4 published. There's 8 in the manuscript form that'll be coming out. And so this has been a process of bringing my intuition, which is another way of saying listening to a vision, and saying, yes, that's something I want to manifest. And it's taken 28 years.
Yeah.
But it never went away.
It never went away.
So that's why I often tell people when I'm working with them, what's the dream you had when you were younger? What just got you so excited you couldn't hardly sit still? And at first until that was just pipe dream. I like to hear it. And then we find out is there something now that relates to that dream that could be manifested to create the life that they really want. And the interesting part is a whole lot of people can figure out, oh, I can do that. And one of the things, go ahead.
I was going to say, I feel, it's like strengthening your ability to give yourself that freedom to create your future exactly the way that you want it. Like, it's almost like you test yourself. Oh, I tried this thing, or I got a job close to my dream job, or then you keep getting, next steps until you finally allow yourself that ability to just go for it.
So a client that I had years ago was working in business, corporate work, got tangled as very young, as often happens if you're very young and you suddenly do very well, depending on your organization. Some of the old timers can put out some booby traps and create failures and all sorts of stuff, and eventually forcing the person to leave. Unfortunately, that there is still a lot of that in business, not all, but
Mm-hmm.
some. But the story for her was it was a calling, because when I really talked and started with her, I said, "Well, what's your ideal?" And so she started basically describing the same thing she's already doing. I said, "Well, that's not pretty ideal, because I just looked like you just went splat. So something's got to change." And so we started talking, and I said, "I'd like to know where in the world you want to live. I mean,
Yeah.
I really want to dream."
Yeah.
She came back, and both her and her husband, she involved him and her husband with it. And the impact of it was they decided they wanted to live in Virginia Beach. They loved the area. They'd been there. And I said, "So why don't we look
Yeah.
for jobs there?"
Yeah.
But at first her comment was, "Well, you can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" So she did. And she moved down there, but she took a job just like the one she had. And that still didn't feel good.
Okay.
And I said, "We're doing stepping stones. You're getting closer to saying yes to whatever it is that you really want to do." Because I still didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Because she was listening to, well, you're supposed to get this job. And if it pays really good, you're supposed to keep that job. It
Yes.
doesn't matter
Yeah.
if you're bleeding every day at work. You're supposed to do that.
Right.
So she had a blessing. The company got sold and moved, and she got a choice with a severance or move with them to another city. And she didn't want to move. She decided to
Mm-hmm.
stay at my ideal place in Virginia Beach.
Mm-hmm.
So she got another job similar to what she had,
Yeah.
and finally just realized this was painful, just too painful. And so she took a leave of absence, and I said, "So what is it that you really want to do?" Now, lo and behold, she explained to me she wanted to go back to school. She thought she was too old, but she wants to go back to school, and she wanted to become a therapist.
Wow.
I said, "Really?" I said, "So, how do we make that possible? Your husband's working, and
Yeah.
you got certain resources. What if we do that?" And it was another one of those, "I don't know if I'm allowed to do that." And I said, "Oh, at your age, guess what? You're the one who gets to decide." So she went back to school.
Yeah.
She became a therapist, counselor, because of all those skills in business.
Mm-hmm.
She has a large agency that she's the owner of, and she has probably 20 counselors working under her.
Wow.
They're happy because she is very supportive and collaborative and wants their environment to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And every day is a pleasure to go to work.
Yes.
It's saying yes to your dreams. It is possible. Now, it took several years to get there, because we are all human beings who are very slow learners.
Well, is that because of all those layers, all our frozen time crystals, all our
What's all the things we've been
stories?
told we can't do?
Yeah.
We've been
Mm-hmm.
told our whole life. And I know, with my age, my family grew up in the Depression. So my parents, that affected them about what you do and don't do.
Mm-hmm.
But when you finally let go of that, it shifts everything. So we're running about out of time. So any concluding comments that you would like to make on this session?
Yeah, that actually, well, right where you ended, I just wanted to add, like, for example, that painted a picture for me. I finally see my parents, I see my family, like, for the people, like, their own stories. I see it. And it's such a beautiful story. If you think about, you know, immigrating and why you want to move to another country and coming out of hard times, psychological safety, lack of it, physical safety, needing a good environment to raise your family and children. And what are you willing to do? And how are you willing to live? And so their beliefs and how they designed their life was really to fit and support moving, surviving, you know. Um, and then my generation now, I think about my siblings, our story is different because it's built on a different set of beliefs. So with belief in education, opportunity, you guys can thrive, you have more tools. but that generation's on sacrifice and duty and, like a couple other beliefs and values to fit what they were trying to do.
Sure.
So now as they transition, they can be free to think or, see things potentially another way.
Well, we
Just
hope.
like myself is undoing all of those
Sure.
beliefs.
Yeah, your parents are always a little more difficult. So my dad used to scratch his head all the time about me and stop. And his comment was, I don't know how you think. Where'd you learn to think that way? And it was because I was breaking a lot of the patterns, but over time, then they began to realize that it's true and it's possible to create the life that you want.
Mm-hmm.
So what I like to do is call this a day. So I'm Herb Stevenson. I appreciate everybody attending.
Sahadeo Ramharrack, thank you all for tuning in with us.
And we'll see you again with Natural Passages, revealing the unmarked doors of life. Thank you.